All right. Excited to be here today with my new friend, Dave Hagen. Dave is a Grammy award-winning engineer and producer. He spent over a decade at Dark Horse recording studios, helping hundreds of artists to craft unique, powerful music across different genres. He's known for his precision and creativity. He combines traditional Nashville expertise with modern production to deliver radio-ready tracks and award-winning results. And I was just telling Dave right before the podcast earlier today, I was looking up Dark Horse Studio, and I was like, just absolutely blown away by how incredible of a place it is. At some point, I would love to go there with our modern musician team or with our community in some way. So I'm sure that at some point, I would love to have a chance to, just to be there. But I've also just saw a big list of all of the artists and the magic that's kind of come out of it. And so I'm really excited to connect with them today just to talk a little bit about his experience as it relates to, taking your music and turning it from an idea into a real tangible thing and how to actually reach and touch people with it. So Dave, thank you so much for taking the time to be here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to talking with you, and we'll have some fun.
Heck yeah. So maybe to start things out, could you just share a little bit about your story and how you came to become the head producer at Dark Horse?
I'm just a rural kid from Missouri. I got into music the way a lot of people did through like band, and then, tuba wasn't getting me any girlfriends, so I picked up a guitar, and that worked much better. So, I kind of got into music. I thought maybe I would do the professional musician thing, maybe tour, maybe be a session player. I wasn't sure. And I was pretty good for Roach, Missouri, which is my hometown. And then I met some real guitar players, and I thought, well, you know what? Maybe I'll be on the other side of the glass for those folks. And I knew a couple people that had like home studios, and that kind of got me the bug to get into recording. So I just decided to jump right in and get into the engineering side of things. And it's a really nice fit for my kind of logical, analytical brain, but also I'm kind of split between that and the creative side. And so I get to really immerse myself in both. I went to a 4-year school, and, I didn't learn very much. And I decided, you know what, I got to get out of this. I got to get out of Missouri. I got to go to a music city. And Nashville was very much kind of my vibe. So I went out, toured all the different studios, did internship interviews at, the whole first page or two of Google. And my last stop of that day was out at Dark Horse. And when you get up there, it's kind of out in the country. It's meant to be everything that the typical Music Row Nashville little box isn't. And it's meant to be a creative place and a retreat where you're private and you're not so worried about schedule and, all that sort of thing. And so we, pulled up, and it was kind of, oh, okay, I feel like I'm at, some mountain resort or a lodge up in the Rockies somewhere. So I really had to kind of beg my way into an internship there, because they sort of asked me the typical questions. Well, do you know how to use this console? Well, no, but I learned fast. Do you know how to use Apache Bay? No, but I learned fast. Do you know how to use, whatever? So I had to kind of prove myself, and basically learned on the job almost everything just as an intern. And fortunately, Dark Horse has a pretty good system for training up interns, and it's organized and it's intentional, which is not the case at a lot of places. And Dark Horse is also, Robin Crow is the owner there. He's always been really good about letting interns use the space to make sure they're ready whenever it's open. And so I just put in tons and tons of hours learning the space, getting in on sessions, getting my skills up so that when I was assisting, I could kind of make an impression and hopefully, stop being an intern and go be a professional. I interned probably a year and a half or so until I sort of had senior status and could beg my way into sessions. And like you mentioned, when you look at a website for a studio, you're going to find a list of artists who've worked there. And for me, being like a guitar player, rock kid, one of those names was this band Relient K, which was, pop punk, really fun band. And I knew all of their songs on guitar, and it was a good entry point for me and me to
trying to bluster through coming out slowly, you don't even know me.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So they came through, and they were on the schedule all of a sudden, and I saw that, and I was like, hey, Robin, you got to put me on this session. Like, this is my session. And they were just doing some overdubs on a Birds and the B-side. So they did like a little small release and just some piano stuff. And so I I set up some mics, and then I sat on the couch the rest of the day while they worked. And it was just a cool experience to meet them. And I did the thing that you always do when you're working with a producer or an artist, be like, hey, if you ever need anything, give me a call, like make sure they got my number, and offer to help however I can. And which did what always happens, and nobody called me and nothing came of that. Then a couple months later, that producer came back out with this other artist that I'd never heard of, but it was cool artist, and it was a fun project, and I got to assist on that. And I did the same thing. Hey, if you ever need anything, give me a call. And I think 1 day later, 2 days later, I get a phone call. I remember clearly I was painting the ceiling of one of the rooms at Dark Horse, and get a call, and he says, hey, it was Mark Townsend, the producer for Reliant K and a bunch of other stuff. And he said, hey, do you do drugs? No. So, okay, you want to help me finish out this project? I can't pay you anything on this one, but after that, maybe we'll figure something out. And so I just went out to his studio about an hour south of Nashville, and spent the next couple of weeks finishing out vocals. Kind of another happenstance was that his former assistant was kind of moving up in the world and moving out, and had done the vocal tuning on this project. But when it came to us, there was some glitches, and we decided to retune the whole thing. And Mark asked me, of course, hey, do you know how to tune vocals? And I was like, of course. Yeah, absolutely. Let me watch you do one and make sure I'm doing it your way. So I watched him, and I watched him very carefully, and I watched his fingers hit all the buttons, and I kind of learned how to do it his way, mostly learned how to do it at all. And then I did half the record, and he did the other half vocal tuning. And at that point, he was sort of like, okay, you're a useful person to have around. And I ended up assisting for him and working with him for, I think, 2-3 years. In that process, got to do a couple Reliant K records. And also, in the meantime, I was continuing to go back to Dark Horse and do engineering for projects that they had come through. I was kind of on the radar still at Dark Horse, and in case they ever needed anybody, hey, you got my number. And turns out a couple years later, Robin Crow, the owner, decided to start a school. We'd been training interns, like I mentioned earlier, for a long time, myself included, and decided that we should do this for real, and we should make this a program and help people get sort of like their training that they need, but do that in a real studio, so that there's not this transition period from when you leave school and you don't really know anything to then have to intern and learn it all on the job. And then you're ready to get into the business. We decided to do a school where you're already at the studio, and the school is like an internship, and you're going to do real recording. And so I thought it was a cool idea, and I came on full time to teach that program and also be one of the engineers one of 2 engineers at the studio. That was, I think, 13 years ago, 2011, 14 years ago. I've been doing it ever since. I taught that audio engineering program for 10 years while being the engineer at the studio, and I've been head engineer most of that time. And yeah, it's been a fun ride. It's kind of how I got here.
That's awesome. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And one thing that I'm very grateful for is just the opportunity to have conversations with folks like yourself, and kind of hear the patterns and the things that a lot of people say are part of their journey. And one thing that really stands out about what you just shared was the role of internship and showing up and like learning by doing, as opposed to just learning theories isolated away from the actual like practice of it. And the same thing with, I just had a conversation with the head of A&R at SoundCloud yesterday. And he said the exact same thing. He got started with an internship, and he learned by doing. He surrounded himself with those people that were already doing it. Yeah, it's amazing that you've created a program and a way to actually give people the education that they need. That's not separate from the actual practice, but actually like getting them into the field doing it. I'm curious, having both done this yourself and become an amazing engineer, as well as teaching and helping so many musicians learn it themselves. I'm sure that you start to see some similar kind of like patterns of biggest mistakes or challenges or struggles that artists kind of that they're facing, or engineers are facing when they first get started. And so I'm curious what some of the biggest ones are that you see when you first start teaching artists.
Since I taught for 10 years and now I'm the director of education at the school, so I'm still kind of very much involved in that process, I've seen a big change. So in the last 13 years, I've seen the challenges that people face kind of shift and change. And I feel like when I started and when the school started, the typical challenge is like, well, how do I show people what I can do. Like, how do I get my name out there? First of all, how do you get good enough to impress people? But then how do you connect with people? How do you let them know that you're an asset to them and that you should be the one that they hire? That's always a challenge because it relies on a very separate set of skills from, the studio stuff is one thing. It's, you got to be able to make music. The other set of skills is very much like running for office. You're out there, you're campaigning, you're meeting people, you're connecting with people. And I've always felt like, the skills that get someone to be a good president don't necessarily, or that's get someone to be elected president, don't necessarily translate to whether they're a good president or any other political office. And so people skills for nerds like myself are the real struggle. The last few years, maybe half a dozen years or so, definitely kind of post-COVID, I feel like the challenges have shifted a little bit, and that's still there. But because our access right now is so huge to the world, to the internet, to the ability to work remotely, I feel like our biggest challenges that I'm seeing with up-and-comers is their own time management, their own personal motivation, and their ability to direct their energy in a place that's really productive. I feel like right now, things are expensive to live in a music town. Like Nashville is an expensive place to live. And so people have to make an income while they're going to school and then while they're interning and while they're kind of building their network. And so that can steal a lot of their enthusiasm and energy for what they're actually passionate about, which is, getting into this music thing. And my personal recommendation for them is always like, go find a job you really don't like, but find a job that's flexible. If you find a job that you really like, and maybe you're working at a cool spot, you're at Guitar Center selling really nice guitars or something, you lose the enthusiasm for getting out of there and the personal motivation to like go grind on the thing that actually matters to you. So I think that's probably my answer to that. That's a big problem that I see right now.
That's really interesting advice, especially that last part. I like that, how you recommend finding something that can help kind of keep you afloat while you're still in that internship phase, but actually intentionally choosing something that you actually kind of don't like, because that pressure, that tension of not actually enjoying it can actually be something that gives you more direction back towards the thing you really care about.
Yeah. And a big part of that is also finding something flexible. Find something where when a gig pops up, you can say, hey, I'm not coming in today, and they won't fire you for that. Because that's a huge part of being available to the career and the passion that you have.
Okay, cool. So it sounds like you've kind of seen some things like shift over time, and something that's kind of been true, but maybe isn't as big of a issue as it used to be, is around the people skills and the social dynamics. And I can really, in high school, I was a very shy, awkward kid, and that was something that I always struggled with. But like what you're saying, I just realized how important it is to actually build those relationships and network and show up and connect. And even your story you shared earlier was a great example of like how you were very clearly like showing up, and you were putting yourself whenever you could. You're like, I can be useful. I can be useful. I'm happy to contribute, provide value as an internship, even when you weren't getting, a lot in return for it. You showed up so that you could get the experience, which does seem like a common thread in a lot of, success stories.
Yeah.
But then also, as it relates to today's day and age, and like the biggest challenge, and aside from kind of the people skills, and aside from developing, the relationship networking kind of in getting chosen, what do you think are some ways that, like, what have you seen kind of separating people who don't have that consistency or that perseverance and the kind of the willingness to stick with it during that initial phase, versus people that do end up kind of making it through that initial internship phase and landing some of those clients?
I mean, some people you can tell like they just have this drive and this passion. Just like some people have a natural gift for singing or a natural gift for engineering. Like some people just have it just innately. It's part of who they are, and you can spot those from a mile away. But there are sometimes, well, I don't want to say anything bad about those people. I think that's amazing and that's great. But that doesn't mean that other people are doomed to failure. I think maybe the interesting way to discuss this is what's the thing that shuts people down? Like, you can talk a lot about what motivates people, but that's kind of different for everybody. But the things that shut us down are all very similar. I feel like we're mostly creatives, and we are kind of in tune with the emotional response of music and how this stuff works and what makes this powerful. That's the things that get us into this. But as creatives and being in tune with our kind of emotional state, we often kind of tie our self-worth with our successes, our creativity, and other people's response to our creativity and our products and the stuff that we make and the mixes that we do. We tie our own self-worth in that. And when people start to feel their self-worth declining because they're not getting the response that they want, because nobody's listening to their mixes, the streaming isn't happening, and whatever that looks like for each creative, it can be really painful. And when stuff gets painful, we avoid it, we shy away from it, and then suddenly our efforts and our enthusiasm have just like trickled away. I always reference with our students this Dunning-Kruger curve. Have you ever heard of Dunning-Kruger?
It's ringing a bell, but I'm not sure.
So it's a cognitive bias. It's one of these things that our brains just kind of innately get wrong. It's the connection between our opinion of our ability and our actual ability.
I have heard that. Yeah.
So what you'll find is that people with very low ability or very low experience, and those are often interchangeable, kind of on the entry level side of being a guitar player, like I found myself, I had very high confidence as a guitar player in Roach, Missouri. And that gave me a great self-confidence and self-worth. And I was very excited about guitar, and I was enthusiastic, and I was pumped about everything I did, and my terrible guitar tones and out of tune playing and all this stuff were very exciting to me. And as I became more skilled and more aware and, grew my ability, suddenly I was like, oh, I'm not as good as I thought I was. And my self-confidence dropped. And suddenly my every bit of improvement that I was making was hurting my feelings and making it like frustrating. For some people, that's like this great drive and they get mad and they just put the hours in. And for a lot of people, it kind of shuts them down a little bit. So I always warn my students, like, you're coming out of a school, you're going to feel like you know what you're doing. Your confidence is going to be higher than ever. And then you're going to hit the real world, and you're going to run up against people that have been doing this for 30 years, and they're going to be a lot better than you. And you're going to turn in mixes that your clients aren't going to like because they just had another mix done by someone who's done it for, 29 years longer than you have. And that can really hurt your feelings, and it drops your self-confidence, drops your enthusiasm. So I always have to, even myself, play this mental game of like, you know what, that mix wasn't as good as I wanted it to be, but that means I improved. My awareness of what is good, my taste have improved a little bit more. My awareness of the mistakes I might make has gone up. So my next mix will be better because my last mix was worse. And I have to remind myself that this is a growth process and that someday, at some point, I'll be happy with this. On the flip side of the Dunning-Kruger thing, where inexperienced people have a lot of confidence, experienced people tend to have less confidence than they should. Their opinion of their ability is lower, and that's where this kind of imposter syndrome thing kicks in. And you've been playing guitar on the road for 10 years, or you've been working in studios for 10 years. And then you start meeting these people that are really great, and they're recognizing your skill and your greatness, but you're not, because you're seeing theirs. And then you suddenly are undervaluing yourself, and you feel like, oh, I don't belong in this space with these people. And that's another trap that our brains kind of get us into, and we have to actively fight our way back out of that.
That's super interesting. Yeah, I feel like I had heard that before with the curve, and how it was like the people at the top of their game tended to undervalue their experience versus the people who are just below them would tend to overvalue it. Super interesting. So what I'm hearing you say is that a really important part is just the mindset, the growth mindset of coming into it, being humble and being willing to learn, and actually being willing to be uncomfortable, like facing the discomfort of growing and becoming more aware of the fact that you're not perfect and that you have issues. But actually, when you see that, reframing it as, that's actually a positive thing, and that's something to lean into and to learn from, as opposed to something I should try to avoid.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a quick-ish story about that.
Yeah.
I did a mix for a client once, and I was happy with it. The client was happy with it. We approved it and sent it off to a mastering engineer. And we were referred to a mastering engineer who's longtime pro, excellent ears, incredible engineer, better mixer than me, better mastering engineer than me, and has worked with major artists. So I was a little nervous like a lot of people are, sending their tracks off to be kind of critiqued and fixed by somebody. And a day later, he's worked on it a little bit and he sends it back and he's like, I'm sorry, I just can't put my name on this.
Wow.
Oh, it's such a painful email to read. And I had an urge to just be like, screw that guy. Like everybody's happy with this mix. What's your deal? Like just master it. You don't have to, promote it or anything. Just do your job. And I had that urge and this kind of innate like self-defense mechanism to protect myself of just like, shut it out. And then I realized like, man, I want to work with this guy. Like this is a person I want to be in my chain of my process. So how can I improve this? And I just gave him a call and I was like, hey man, can you tell me why? Like, what are you hearing right now? And I would love to fix this. And I'd even, I'll come out to your studio. I'll pay you for your time. Like, can you help me fix this rather than just like ending this process? And he goes, oh yeah, well, I was just hearing some like distortion on the side channels. And I was like, oh, well, I think I can fix that. Like we can workshop this and I can get you a mix that works great. And he's like, you know what? I think it might be your summing. I've heard rumors of this thing happening. And he's like, why don't you bring your tracks over here and we'll mess with it at my place? And I was like, oh, heck yeah. And so then I get to go out to his studio and hear my tracks in his room and I'm hearing my mistakes all of a sudden. And he's pointing stuff out. And then I take it back and I tweak stuff and I fix it and I send it off and he goes, oh, killer. That's great. Let's go with it. And I was like, whew, that was an incredible experience of like elation at the end of the process that we had gotten there, that I was doing something that he was happy with, but also like knowing that if I can just be humble and ask for help from people that are further along than me, they're happy to do it in most cases. And he even got back with me a couple days later and he's like, you know what, I was thinking about that. And that was a really cool way you approached that. And, if you ever need anything, let me know. I'm happy to help.
Wow.
And so I earned a friend out of that, not just a master or the payment for that mix or whatever.
Wow. That's a great story. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I'm curious, how do you recommend, like, what I'm hearing from that is just like a level of awareness or a willingness to sort of like separate from, I don't know, like the attachment to that product with like it reflecting your self-worth. Like you were able to sort of like let go, even though you felt that twinge of kind of like self-defense and like that, like the ego kind of popping up, wanting to defend, and you were able to separate from that and say, you know what, like maybe I can actually learn something here and use this as an opportunity to grow.
Yeah.
I'm curious, like, what's your advice to help develop that muscle of awareness or separation from like the attachment to it? Because I feel like that's such an important part of being able to grow, but it doesn't come easily.
No, man, I would say start small. Like, don't turn in a final mix to a big mastering engineer and then you see how you react. Start with some humility in the early stages. Like wherever you're at right now, ask someone nearby what they think. Like, tell me your thoughts on this mix. Like, what are you hearing right now? What can I tweak? To start that process kind of before you finish it, so that you're already kind of saying, okay, I'm open to suggestion. I'm open to input. And you may not agree with everything they say, and it may not match your style or your vision or something, but just starting that process in small ways, I think definitely helps. My assistants who work with me at the studio and help me with run sessions, when we have like full tracking sessions, I'm running 40 inputs of 7 different players and there's a lot going on. And my assistants are kind of key part of that process, making that all work. My favorite assistants and the ones that I always like seek out and want to bring back, at the end of the day, they'll have a list of questions. They'll have a list of things that went wrong and they'll come to me and be like, hey, what could I have done better? How could that have run more smoothly? And those are the people that instantly you're like, oh, I'm on your team. I'm going to help you as much as I possibly can. The people that are like kind of smug about it and they've been playing on their phone and they're disregarding mistakes and they're not valuing my input, those are the ones that I'm like, okay, I wish you all the best, but I'm not going to necessarily contribute to that. I think just start small, start early, like wherever you're at, just start with asking little small questions. And then over time, you start to recognize the difference between the work and your own value.
That's super helpful. Yeah, what it reminds me of is I feel like I've heard a lot of people who are smarter than I am just really harp on the value of curiosity and kind of like a hunger to learn and grow. And what you just shared there was kind of spoke to that. Like you notice, like they're very curious, or they're hungry to grow. They want to learn. They ask for your advice, and they don't take it personally, but they kind of have that curiosity, or that drive, or that itch to grow. For someone that might be listening or watching this right now, who maybe they have big goals or ambition, and they really want to become, one of a renowned mixing engineer, or more so, maybe they just they want to create amazing music, and they are struggling with getting an initial foothold and just kind of cutting through. They feel maybe it's very saturated, and it's kind of hard to get that initial relationship or connections. How do you recommend that they get started with developing that?
First step is always get to where the music's happening. You've got to be nearby where the good stuff is going down. You've got less chance. It's very much more difficult if you're doing everything remotely. So even if it's a temporary solution, go find where the music's being made and find a way to be valuable to that process. Don't expect that anybody will bring you in at the high levels. If you're an unknown engineer, you're not going to go walk in the doors of a major label and they'll be like, oh yeah, why don't you produce this for me? Or why don't you mix this song for me? We'll see how it goes with the next Adele single. That's just not going to happen. But you are potentially likely to get your foot in the door at a low level in a place where that stuff's happening. So you might be coming in as the assistant or the runner on those sessions. You might come in as work your way up to the person who's doing basic track edits and nudging things around and kind of prepping the mix. You might be the person who's responsible for tuning the mix or tuning the vocals on this bigger record, or, doing the rough mix for the mix engineer. And you kind of work your way up into these places where suddenly you are at a very high level with your skills, and the people around you who are already there are recognizing that. And then they start trying to bring you in on your next level, whatever that is. So I think being a home studio owner someplace other than a music city is totally legit as a career path. And it's a really exciting and interesting way to be involved in music daily. But it does present its own challenges if what you're trying to do is get into mainstream, bigger stuff. And that doesn't necessarily mean that's the right path for a lot of people. A lot of people really value just working with musicians that are great and are on their journey as well. And I think in those cases, the way you can do that is just the way you can grow that network and build your skill set at the same time is to always undersell, over deliver. And so if you're not certain that you can get them a radio ready mix, don't charge enough for that. Charge less than you think that they are expecting, and over deliver. Give them the best possible mix you can. Spend your own time, invest your own time into figuring out how to make this thing great. And then they're going to come back for sure. If you come in like a used car salesman and just sell them on all of your services and how great you are and how amazing their experience is going to be, even if you are good, you're going to be equal to their expectations, and they're not going to be that enthusiastic about, kind of returning and bringing back that next thing.
That's smart. Yeah. So it sounds like what you're saying is that, to start with, you have to surround yourself with the people and where the magic's happening. That's, at least your odds are significantly more likely if you just find a way to surround yourself there. But also in combination with that, if you surround yourself, but then you're just a jerk or you're not providing value, then it's not actually helpful. In fact, it might be the opposite.
Right.
But
yeah, you can get shut out of those spaces pretty quickly if you're not performing.
So first of all, find a way to surround yourself with people that are doing what you want to do, to learn from them, but then also show up with the right attitude where you're looking to provide value and over deliver. And rather than you kind of posturing or overselling, and if you oversell and then you do great, the expectation was met. So even that's if you undersell and you over deliver on the expectation, that has an effect to really help people remember you and to to build a better relationship.
Yeah, I often feel like sometimes in those relationships where you come at some stuff with humility, you approach them with humility, and you want to know if this is the right thing for them, and if you're doing what they actually wanted out of this, they will become your biggest champion. They will be like, oh man, no, you're killing it. Let me go talk to these other people. They're going to want to get in on this as well. if you oversell, people kind of get skeptical. They're not going to spread the word in the same way.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. That story that you told earlier too, just about how you responded, and when you respond in the right way, like it flips on like a light switch where it's like, wow, like, oh, that's actually really cool. It's refreshing that this person had some humility or was humble and was, wanting to learn, and that led to you building a relationship and building a friendship. And so, yeah, it sounds like what you're saying is it's a better approach to show up, provide value, and over deliver on what you're expecting. And that's going to lead to them wanting to recommend you to other people as well.
That's the hope.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I know you've spent the last more than a decade basically taking everything that you've steeped yourself in terms of like the culture of mixing and making music and creating magic, and now you've also been able to help share that with education as well. I'm curious, for anyone here that's listening to this who's interested in learning more about that and what you're doing, could you share a little bit more about the workshops and what's a good way for people to get involved?
Yeah. So Dark Horse Institute, like I said, kind of came out of Dark Horse Recording and just the experience we had kind of training people. And we've really turned it into its own thing. And sort of like Dark Horse was the alternative to the standard classic concrete box studios, we wanted the school to be kind of refreshing and its own experience that didn't feel like going to school. It felt like on the job training. So the audio engineering program started just in our regular studio. And we pretty quickly realized like the students will be better served if we build our own space. And so we have a separate place with big Trident studio, the original Trident from Dark Horse Recording, and an SSL and a couple more rooms for mixing. And there's a whole bunch of Pro Tools rigs and all that stuff. So it's its own space that's fully functional. And in there, we run an audio engineering program that's 20 weeks long. 5 hours a day, 5 days a week. So this very much feels like a immersive experience, like you are a full-time professional engineer. Now, once you actually are, it's going to be a lot more than 5 hours a day, but it feels like plenty, and it's a good pace because we can get you through all the technical stuff in 20 weeks, as well as have time to practice. And in that process, we'll record 2 different bands that are just outside bands with real hopes and dreams, and we do our best to get a full capture of their EP, and also help you build your portfolio with some of that stuff. Because when you leave a recording school or any school, especially in the music industry, very rarely am I asked about like my resume or stuff. They're just like, what have you done? What can I listen to? And send me some mixes that you've done. That's how you get hired. And so we have an audio engineering program. After a while, we realized like we can really help kind of people grow a little more if we explore the business side of this, not just the technical side. And so we run a music business program. It's now 15 weeks. And again, we have one in person, and it's 5 hours a day, 5 days a week. And so it's a full-on immersion into what does it take to develop an artist from, just a talent to someone that can get signed by a label, or can be managing their own label, or can be independently distributing, where you get to keep all your own money. And how does that work? And what are the pieces and parts? And what sort of a team are you going to have to build? And actually, just this morning, our music business class that's about to graduate tomorrow, they were pitching to industry professionals. I know there was someone there from Universal, and there was a management company and a few different people. And we tend to bring in a bunch of professionals, and we will scout talent, develop that talent, and at the end of the program, they'll pitch those artists to the real music industry. And it's meant to be a mock pitch where we're just practicing, but in reality, we've actually gotten, I think, 4 or 5 of them signed in the last couple of years, and they're real talent. And we record them in the studio, and I'll mix them, and it's a really fun process. We also have a songwriting class that's a couple of years old. We've had it going for 4 or 5 years now. And it's also 15 weeks, and it's called Composition and Songwriting. And we'll jump from music theory up to lyric techniques and sync writing, which, there's 3 main ways to make money in the music industry. There's merchandise, touring, and sync placements. So if you get your song that you wrote placed in a commercial or in a TV show, there's a lot more cash coming in than if you get 1 million streams on Spotify. And so we make sure that people know how to do that and how to market themselves to those music supervisors. And then also how to write for an artist, how to write for yourself. And their final project is some big co-writes, and we'll record all their demos, and they leave with a portfolio that they've tracked at the big studio and all that stuff. And we bring in outside musicians to play so that we make sure the demos sound really good. And it's a super fun process. Starting at the end of March 24th, 2025, we are going to run a brand new program called Advanced Mixing. And that's going to be sort of for the engineers who are already out there, who have been interning or assisting for someone, running a home studio wherever they're at. Because it's online, I can connect with people anywhere. And the idea is to build a program that's the best of what we already do, the hands-on real world interaction and mentorship, which is, I'm a huge believer in mentorship. And also the flexibility of stuff like anybody who's interested in that sort of thing is already doing. Pure Mix and Mix with the Masters and all these other companies that are out there creating great content, that they fall short in the ability to critique your work. So you might watch a top mixer go show you or tell you about a technique, and then you go practice it and you do it wrong somehow, but nobody's there to help you or help you guide you through that process or critique it and let you know that, oh, you could have just done this and it would have been all better. So this program is basically 50-50 content that I'll be creating myself and interviewing a bunch of professionals, and mentorship twice a week. We'll be doing like 3 hours a week, 2 times. So 6 hours total per week of direct mentorship where we can stream mixes back and forth and we can work through and workshop everything. So I'm really excited about that. I think it's going to help kind of be that next level where you can start turning in really high level professional mixes after that.
What an incredible resource. We are so lucky to be living through a time where we have access to be able to learn from things like that.
Yeah. And I mean, it'll be very much like you and I talking here, where we can just kind of interact directly. We're both in front of our speakers or headphones, and it'll be a pretty powerful experience, I think. I'm excited about it.
Very cool. So for anyone that's listening or watching this right now who is interested in one of the things that you just shared, what would be the best place for them to go to dive deeper?
I mean, the first place would just be our website, darkhorseinstitute.com. We've kind of got all the information in there, and then contact if you want to get a hold of us about any particular program. If you run our 3 in-person classes, be done with your whole audio music education within a year. And I think that's pretty powerful. My audio graduates, they've got because I did the 4-year thing plus an internship. So I'd say they get about a 3.5, 4-year head start on my career and a whole lot less money, because we really are trying to we've designed the schedule and the price point all around like what serves the student the best, not what serves our pocketbook the best.
That's amazing. But like always, we'll put all the links in the show notes for easy access for people to be able to go check it out. And
thank you.
Dave, man, it's been great connecting and hearing your story and being able to, just kind of like piece together these puzzle pieces and see different perspectives on the same thing is very, very helpful and inspiring for me. So thank you for the work that you're doing for artists everywhere. And thank you for being on the podcast today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. This was fun.
Yeah.